Hello everybody, how are you all doing? In this video, I'll be talking about reactions to triggers and intrusive thoughts, intrusive images, intrusive urges, real events, false memories, sensations, whatever it is that's triggered you and how your reaction is key. So what I often hear is that people will say, oh, but I had this intrusive thought and this was the compulsion. The intrusive thought was the compulsion. No. The intrusion, that's what OCD does. That's how it operates, right? You'll have an intrusive thought, intrusive image, intrusive urge, intrusive name getting stuck, a memory from the past. Your brain will scan. It will go after a core fear, make it feel as real as it can get with a realness factor jacked up. That's what it does. That's not the compulsion. That's just how it operates. That's the intrusion. Okay, that's how OCD scares you, with the intrusiveness. Okay, the reaction is where you go into the compulsive territory. Okay, so if you are getting triggered by an intrusive thought, it comes in, let's say, during an unwanted time, or maybe it suddenly feels super real around being stuck forever with fear of fear. Maybe it's a contamination trigger. Maybe it's a sensory motor. You're just triggered all the time because you're locked in this sort of blinking sensation. Whatever the fear may be, HOCD, you're convinced that you're actually homosexual and you're not heterosexual. All these different fears, real event, false memory, you're triggered by an event in the past, you can't seem to get it to budge, it's locked on real hard. Whatever that is, it's the reaction that's absolutely key. Okay, so if you're then trying to solve, trying to replay, trying to get to the bottom of it, trying to seek certainty, analysing, trying to get rid, always ask, what is your intention when you have that intrusive thought come in? What do you do to get rid of that? Do you try to alleviate the anxiety? Do you try to get rid of a feeling? Do you try to seek certainty? Are you avoiding something? Are you trying to control? Are you trying to chase comfort to get rid of your uncomfortable feelings? It's the reaction which then becomes the compulsion. Now, when we have the internal talk back, the internal reassurance, the internal dialogue, always ask yourself, what is the intention? Because what often happens is, when on the journey, you're obviously learning rational thinking, you're learning unconditional acceptance, which is awesome. But the problem is that when one is triggered, an intrusive thought comes in, a trigger comes in, and it's like rationing. You could accept yourself even if that were true. Even if that were true, I could adapt, I could rebuild my life. Okay, valid point. The problem is that you're playing that rational card at the wrong time. Okay? So with rational thinking, during a heat of a trigger, during a heightened anxiety state, when you're triggered, there is no dialogue needed. There is no internal talk back, internal disagreement, internal, trying to sort of gather evidence to prove why the worst fear can't come true. All of that is very compulsive. It's very reassurancy, right? Now, although you might not be reassuring yourself with self-reassurance statements, you're still reminding yourself of rational thinking and unconditional acceptance, all what you're learning in the books, the one-to-one calls, the disputing. You're saying it, but you're still doing it to get rid of your anxiety. I'm afraid that when you're triggered and when you're feeling very uncomfortable, the only thing that you can do is wear that discomfort like an uncomfortable coat as best as you possibly can. Healthy distractions are key. They help you along. Doing your absolute utmost to resist compulsions when you're triggered. But there is no magic sentence. There is no rational line that's going to make it all go away. Now, I'd rather you say rational thinking than reassurance. Okay, reassurance is the wrong card at the wrong time, whereas rational thinking is the right card but being played at the wrong time because you're using it to get relief. You're using it to get rid of your anxiety symptoms. That's a no-go because that keeps the OCD cycle pumping away, fueled up, and you get in that internal tug of war with OCD where you're constantly trying to get rid of your symptoms. When you've got OCD and when you're triggered, it's all about wearing that as best as you can. Okay, I know that's super, super hard. I'm totally aware of that, okay? But any attempt to get rid of your symptoms only prolongs the suffering. Rational thinking is designed for on the side, breaking it down, consistent perspective work, changing philosophies, chipping away, day by day by day by day. Now, when you're just walking along down the street and you get triggered by an intrusive thought or an intrusive urge, that isn't the time to think rationally to get rid. That rational thinking is sinking in gradually over time with the more work you put in, the persistence, the effort that you're putting in. Everyone's different. I'm talking to a general audience here, hence why the one-to-one call is very important, because maybe you're going too much, maybe you're trying to force it, maybe you're not putting in enough work, and that's for us to judge as coaches. But ultimately, it's not designed for the heat of the moment. Now, what I can often see is people may even go the other way, and they won't ever break it down, and they'll just reassure themselves again and again and again, just getting that short-term temporary relief with the intention to get rid of feelings, rid of discomfort, rid of anxiety, rid of the trigger. It doesn't work. It's only very temporary, it's only very short-lived. So you can often get sort of the kicking the can, which is where the fear's there, but you're just using reassurance to get by temporarily, but getting nowhere and just going around in circles. And you're gonna have to face the fears and break down the irrational beliefs eventually. You can't keep delaying it. You can't keep kicking the can along, because all that's gonna do is just prolong the suffering in the long run. Okay, so there will be a time where you break down the fears, but not in the moment. You're not getting triggered and going, right, rational. What I used to do when I was about 18 months, 2 years into the journey, when I understood the principles of rational thinking, what I used to do was that when I was triggered, I could think rationally, but the key difference was that I wasn't doing it to get rid of my anxiety, because that's when it became a problem. Because if I was trying to sort of protect myself from the anxiety and shield myself by then forcing rational thinking and forcing acceptance and making sure it's going in and making sure I'm understanding it all. Yes, you could accept yourself, Sam. You could accept yourself. Yeah, okay, you wouldn't like it, but you could accept yourself. You could accept yourself. That didn't work. That was just forcing it to get rid. When I was triggered, I could see it. So I could see, I can see what's triggered me there. That's the fear. I can see I can break that down. And I would start trying to break that down. But the big difference was it wasn't to get rid of anxiety, because I was willing to experience all kinds of discomfort, wearing the trigger, wearing the discomfort, and not needing to get rid. Okay, you don't need to get rid of those symptoms, because that's what keeps it locked on, because OCD knows you're trying to get rid, so it heightens it. Okay, meaning that it feels even tighter, it feels even stronger, and OCD really gets that grip. Okay, and that's really, really hard. That's really, really hard. And what OCD sufferers aren't very good at, understandably, and this is just humans in general, is that when you feel like crap, you just immediately look to get relief, don't you? Right? But when you've got an anxiety disorder, a key part of this, and this is when you become wise to OCD and how it's operating, a key part of it is that when you are feeling anxious, it's just, okay, surrender, weapons dropped, I don't need to get rid. I don't need to do anything about this, right? I want to build my tolerance, build my discomfort, build my frustration tolerance, practicing not needing to get an answer, not needing to fix, not needing to know. I mean, so many triggers is down to uncertainty. That never-ending uncertainty. Oh my God, if I'm going to lose my job, I need to know now. I need to ask that person right now, what do you think? Because you can't see an end in sight, and you feel trapped, and you feel like there's no way out. And that is why people then do a compulsion, because they feel like they're going to be uncertain forever. And because OCD sufferers aren't very good with uncertainty, they then do the compulsion. They then perform the compulsion to alleviate those symptoms. But that's the problem. Okay, you've got to allow those symptoms to fade out naturally. And there'll be times where it feels like, oh my God, they're not going anywhere. Sam, they're locked on, they're stuck in my mind, they're just sat there. Well, we've got to keep allowing them to be there whilst we chip away at the beliefs on paper, a time, not when you're heightened, triggered, not when you're in that state. Okay, if you're triggered 24/7, there's going to come a point where on the call we say, well, look, you're going to have to dispute even those symptoms there. Hence why they're tailored for you. Hence why, I'm speaking to the general audience here. Okay, but usually, if you're really, really going through a tough time in that boom triggered moment, that is not the time to then get the pen and paper out. It's not the time to run to the books. okay? Because what often happens is that you've got to see it that each time you self-reassure or force rational thinking, you're keeping that threat detection system in your mind tuned up, because you're showing your brain that you need to diffuse the threat, you need to neutralize the threat. So you're telling yourself, say something to get rid of it, say something to get rid of it. As you are facing your fears, maybe you're cutting your compulsions, maybe you're doing your exposures, you're showing your brain it doesn't need to react in that way. You don't need to remind yourself anything. You don't need to tell yourself anything. You just need to learn to sit with that. And as we build our tolerance and resist these compulsions and keep working on the beliefs on the side, then you'll start noticing these triggers happen less and less and less, and they come down with time. But that's going to require patience and a lot of persistence, and it's a longer time frame. You know, it's not 6 months, it's not 9 months, it's not a year, it's going to be longer than that. You can make great progress, you really, really can. But you've got to remember that it's going to take a little while to turn that threat detection system down. And that threat detection alarm system in your mind with the fight or flight, trigger, will come down when that self-acceptance has been embodied. Rational thinking starts flowing more naturally as you start going towards your fears. You don't feel the need to run away, you don't feel the need to escape. But ultimately, if you get triggered out of the blue, and that can happen, caught off guard, it's then, right, okay, even though if I can see it rationally, I don't need to remind myself to get rid of my anxiety. I have to see it as building a tolerance building exercise, like I tend to say. We've got to wear it, zip up the uncomfortable coat, get used to wearing it, bring it all for the ride, and not needing to fix, solve, replay, or anything to get rid. But a lot of that's automatic, allowing it to be there, not engaging with it, not trying to get an answer, and definitely not reassuring yourself and not forcing rational thinking down your throat to get rid of the anxiety. That's not going to work, okay? Our reaction to how we deal with intrusiveness, thoughts, urges, names, images, whatever it may be, is key, okay? It's not the intrusion that's the compulsion, it's your reaction to whatever the intrusion is. Something to think about. If you are interested in one-to-one calls, please email phil@ocdrecovery.com and you get in touch with me, Sam, and all the other coaches here, Nick, Rob, Momin, Gemma, Elliot. We can book you in as soon as we can. Guys, take care, look after yourself, and we'll speak again. Bye-bye.